Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we're going to learn about Google Fonts. But before we begin, my wife saw the about us, about me video kind of thing, and I didn't mention that I have a wife and kids, so I thought I'd probably better jump in here and say I have a wife and kids, so that way I don't get in trouble with this channel anymore. And she also hated this plant in the background. I don't know, I'm just kind of a minimalist. I don't really like anything in my office, so there's that. So now we covered all that, let's get into some Google Fonts and make these videos a little bit more interesting and fun. So I hope you're having a good time so far with everything. So let me share my screen here and we'll get to it. All right, so how do we install Google Fonts on our website? Well, what we've got to do is go to Google Fonts. So we can just search for Google Fonts, go to Google Fonts. And then once we're on the site, we're presented with a bunch of different font faces that we can choose from. So let's find one that you like. There's a lot of popular ones that, especially these first couple here that I'm seeing that are used a lot. Find one that suits you best. You've got some options here to kind of uncheck some things and look for some more fancier or cursive fonts. The font I'm going to use for our little tutorial, we're doing some things with knives. I've decided I don't really want to use this knife logo anymore. Let's just use a font face instead. So I've already selected this font. I really like it. So we find a font that we want. Now, how do we use it? So, well, first thing we do is hit select this font. Okay, now it's selected. Well, now what? Now we got to go here, and we've got some options to embed and customize. So under customize, depending on the font that you choose, it'll have different, what we call font weights. So those range. Why don't we go back and look at that really quickly? So let's select a font like this. And you can select multiple fonts. So we've selected what I like to call Monster Rat, but Montserrat. So we've got font weight 100, 200, 300. So these are all the different weights. And in CSS, we can actually specify a font weight and give it that number. And that number will make the font that particular bold or light or medium weight that you give it. So yeah, kind of cool. And when we're selecting the font out of the box, you do have to kind of have those checked in order for that to work correctly. You can still kind of bold your font, but you might not get the exact weight that you were wanting, or things might look a little off. So it's always good to select the weights that you need. As we can see here, the more that we kind of check, it'll increase the load time. So we don't want to add just a ton of fonts just because. We only want to add the fonts that we really need. So I don't really need the Monster Rat, what I like to call that font, but totally incorrect. So I've got the Metal Mania selected. This one only comes with just the regular, which is typically 400. So I'm going to use this. So we go to our embed, and how does this work? Well, we've learned about the link tag, so we can copy this right here and go paste this over on our site. Now, a few things. So let's notice where we're including the normalize. I've just decided to roll with that for this project. Where does our fonts come into play? Well, if we're maybe putting stuff in our normalize, maybe the font should come very first if we're using that font weight. Maybe that would be the better way to go about it. Let's just do that. Just include it right before any of your style sheets, because we need this to load first before we can use it. So that's important to know. Okay, so all it is here is the URL where all these fonts are located, and we're specifying the very type of font family that we want, and then we're familiar with the Borel style sheet. You can see kind of how they've ordered their attributes. I mentioned this in another video, how I like to kind of order the importance first. So in this case, it looks like that's what they've done. Feel free to make them however you'd like. It doesn't matter as long as they're both on there. But maybe just for this project, we could do that. That way everything matches, right? Okay, so now we've got it included. What else is down here? So we have the font family. So this is the very first CSS property and value that we'll use for today's lesson. So let's see what happens to our site when we've used it. Nothing. Okay, well, great. It's included. I'm viewing the page source here, and that kind of gives a great overview of everything that's on the website. This browser sync thing is just something so that way anytime I make a change and save here, it'll automatically refresh. Haven't covered that yet. That's okay. We'll get into that eventually. So how do we use this font? So first, we need to specify this on whatever element that's going to be using it. So let's go to our CSS. We don't need any of this junk. And let's make our, well, I don't want my body, but I will do the H1 element, and we'll say, I want the font family to be the new font that we've included. And what this is doing here is it's setting, you can add multiple fonts. Like for instance, well here, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's show you how to include this, and then we can go from there. So go back to here. Cool, that's pretty rad. So we've got our custom font that we've selected right on there. Now, don't need any of this junk. And let's check this out, see what we've got going on here. Okay, we've got a certain font size. Looks bold. What we want to do, so we've got this default font weight bold, but you'll notice the font doesn't look quite super clean and clear, right? So our font weight only had, if we go back to customize, the one that I selected only had the font weight of 400. And font weight 400, there's kind of these shorthands, right? We've got bold, normal, light. Here, let's check this out. And I forgot, I'm struggling a little bit with getting these increased on the screen so everyone can see what's going on. So let me know in the comments if you know of a better solution to, maybe I just need to remember that. So we've got our font weight. So look, here's all the different numbers, right? We've got light or thin. There's all kinds of different names that they give these, but then we've got these actual names here. So bold is typically equivalent to 700. And we've got bolder, normal, lighter. So we could say font weight bold, right? Well, that's what the default is. That's what all of our headings start out as. So we know ours is going to be 400. That's what I've only selected and included. In this case, this font only comes with 400. So you can still bold the fonts, but look at what happens. It just doesn't look quite right. Really crank this up here so you can kind of see. So we can bold any of our fonts, but they all will react a little differently depending on what weights are available to them. So something to be aware of and think about when we're just including fonts. Double check everything, look at it all, and make sure that it looks right. When you do include your other font weights, let's go look at that really quickly. Maybe I should have just used this font so we're doing a better example. But when I go and check all these, and then I go back to our embed, look right here what happens. We've got the Montserrat, and it has 200, 200i, 300. So there's all the font weights that we're actually including, and it'll load those specific styles for you. So whereas mine, it didn't have any, so it didn't include anything. So pretty cool. So that's the font weight. And let's get rid of, I didn't really want this logo. If you guys have a logo or an image, that's fine. So let's show you how to use this, how I'd use my font with the logo. So one, I'd write an A tag, This will just link to the home page. And then I want this just to be about, why don't we just make this a weapons website? That'd be kind of cool. So we no longer need this. And what I do need to do is I need to put a class on here, and we'll call it logo. Okay, so weapons, it's a link, but it does not look anything like this. So let's go change this H1 to our .logo. Okay, cool, so that changed that. So now we've got it, but man, it just does out of the box. This does not look very good because it's a link, but I don't really want it to look like a link. I want it to look more like a logo. So some CSS, we'll just jump right in. I know we haven't really covered a whole ton of CSS, but sometimes we're just going to have to learn it on the fly and get more accustomed to it. So that removes that. I want to give this a color of red for now. Okay. So we're getting there. It's kind of small. Cool, looking good. Now I can set the font weight on here, but it's not necessarily needed because this link just by default, we can go over here and kind of see what font weights, if there were any set at all anywhere. It doesn't look like it. So by default, font weight's just going to be 400 because that's what regular is. So I don't really need to include that unless there was, for some reason, something I was targeting that had other weights. So that's the gist of it. So I hope you found that interesting. And then we'll continue to style our website and add some different fonts. Now, earlier, just one last thing, I was talking about the font family. If I wanted to, we can have a fallback. And so that's kind of what this cursive is doing. If it can't find the Metal Mania, it'll fall back to whatever system font we have, such as, in this case, it'll be a cursive one. But I could come here and say, I would like the Arial font family, and it'll read that first if it can find it. If it can't find it, then it would fall back to our Metal Mania. So you can see here, if we were to just get rid of this, it goes right back to Metal Mania. Pretty cool. So that should do it for today's lesson. I hope you liked it, and it'll get more exciting as we go. So find a good font and play around with that for a little bit, and let me know if you have any problems. Alrighty, later.